everybody, my name is Alana Gerson, and here we've got Brett Fleischman and Meredith Damberg. Here we're going to be discussing the climate risk assessment for São Paulo.
We're going to begin to sow a thread of a theme through our slides, starting with the adaptive capacity. And that theme is really working towards highlighting the urban poor as our major risk characters. So in the tools is our adaptive capacity tagline. And the first one that we put up there is financial capital. So we already mentioned that the budget of the city is 13 billion. And actually earlier this year, the mayor of São Paulo launched a $5 million initiative to fight floods of the city. And I thought like 20% of the slums are located in floodplains. And we're talking 900,000 houses that are considered at risk on slopes and in floodable areas. And then, yeah, just again to highlight access with, the average daily travel time for the poorest quintile is 4.5 hours. So access in and out during emergency is an issue.
There are a small percentage of lower income residents in the center of the city, which, as Brett mentioned before, is Sweden, but there are some of these people that are living in, they're like rental residences that are sort of not very well maintained. But the majority of the poor people that are living in these peripheral areas live in these two different types of development, favelas and loteamentos. And they're basically just two different sizes of low-income housing formats, if you will. But what we should really focus on here is that hazards, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity combine to create risk. The idea through our recommendations, which I'll go into next, is to reduce the size of that sort of risk bubble. But the general risk that we found to be presented are sort of hazards to housing and to the safety of existing infrastructure, to roads, and to people's access to water, electricity, food, and basic services, including medical assistance and transportation. These sort of problems that are going to be generated, that could be generated from climate hazards, might produce sort of morphing demographics and displacement. And one thing that we wanted to focus on with our recommendations was sort of this idea of decentralizing and redistributing some of the existing sources of energy and water and transportation. Because we found that, for example, with energy, as Alana said, 84% currently comes from hydropower, which is great because it's a renewable source, but currently it's generated from just 2 dams for the most part, while everything is interconnected. One of our recommendations is that they increase their use of renewable sources of energy, including maybe wind, which Brazil is a huge leader in producing wind energy, and also utilizing wave power because they are a coastal city. So maybe to, and that has co-benefits in terms of mitigation and adaptation. The mitigation benefits would be, helping to say, rather than developing another enormous dam, which is in the works in northern Brazil, which would produce lots of CO2 emissions through construction, that they could instead work on regional and more distributed, smaller sources of energy within existing parts of the city and maybe focusing them on these sort of outer areas. Improving access to transportation, mitigation benefits through reducing carbon dioxide emissions, which currently, like I said, a lot of those peripheral areas depend on smaller minibuses that then take them either into the center of the city or take them into transport hubs. And just those buses in transport produce a lot of carbon emissions, and one thing that they could do is extend the bus network. They do have an existing dedicated bus network, but it doesn't reach nearly far enough in order to provide to these dense populations on the periphery of the city. And thirdly, with the distributed rainwater collection network, just sort of increasing access to water would help with adaptation, and also in terms of mitigation would, one thing that I'm not sure was mentioned earlier, but just in terms of reservoirs, they do produce methane on their own, just from being there, especially with hydropower, and the churning up of the vegetation at the bottom of those reservoirs ends up producing methane. So a second recommendation is to continue increasing the prevalence of permeable surfaces. Sao Paulo does have a project right now where they're working on what they call linear parks, which are permeable green like vegetation areas that surround waterways, and it'll help to absorb water during flood times. And then feasibility reports are essential, knowing exactly what's needed and where, and being able to cater specific projects to those that need them most.